Hi, everyone. Welcome to By the Horns on this beautiful evening on the 2nd of June. And today we're welcomed by Tensai Bankai. He's well known on Twitter. He even had a good time with Russell Okung the other night.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. There's a little bit of imposter syndrome coming on here. I'm just a pleb. I'm just a normal guy who's become very passionate and sort of drawn into the space. The more I've learned, yeah.
Has someone got a video on? Is there feedback your side?
There's no feedback on my side.
No, it's not on my side.
Okay, sorry. I think I got it on my side. Anyway, I'd just like to talk today about how they can help South Africa and Africa in general. Then let's focus on the financial side, and basically there's a lot of problems in South Africa. There's a lot of socio-political issues, and there's a lot of questions about what Bitcoin can do. Bitcoin can't solve everything, right? But it can solve a lot of things, especially if it takes the power away from governments. But before we get towards those things, maybe Tensai, introduce yourself a little, talk about your journey towards Bitcoin, what you went through, the pains you went through, because we all did, and where you are now and what you see in Bitcoin going forward.
Yeah. So I guess my journey to where I am now in Bitcoin, sort of encompasses a lot of the economic journey that I had to go through. Like, I grew up poor, born in apartheid. I remember, my mother, on the train asking her, "Can we go to that beach?" And her saying, "No, you can't," and I come from a family which is, very bad with money management, which is very often common in working class communities. Brought up, I was just angry. I was angry at the world as the, and I think, that sort of laid the seeds for me in university, being so drawn into Marxism. I was, full on revolutionary, beat the system, the capitalists are destroying everything. And yeah, that's the funny thing about the ANC. They sort of have a funny way of beating out these sort of communist or socialist ideals out of you. You sort of, when you experience a bad government firsthand, it sort of destroys all those ideals that people preach to you about the goodness and greatness of having a big government. And we can see that, in just the gross destruction of human life. Our schooling system just produces all this essentially human waste. These people can't do anything. And yeah, so I'm having all this Marxism going through my head, and then, I've always been into tech, and then all of a sudden the Slashdot article, I was an avid Slashdot reader. It comes across my email in 2010, whenever it was. And I was like, holy shit, this is cool. I installed the software on my really old laptop and I start mining. Didn't really understand how important, backing up your wallet was and all that stuff. So I lose that wallet. I get into it again a year later when a friend reminds me. He said, "Hey, this Bitcoin thing is pretty cool." And I go for it again, lose the wallet again. And then in 2012, I do honors. And we had in our computer science lab, we had a whole network of Linux machines. I SSH into all of them. I connect all of them to a Bitcoin mining pool, and I'm mining Bitcoin with half the computers in the lab. And I lost that wallet. And so there was a lot of mistakes that I made along the way till that point. And then I think it was in 2014, me and some friends are talking, and we're like, "Yo, man, let's hook up some Butterfly Labs miners, and let's start like trying to mine some more." And thank God we didn't pull the trigger on those. So missed that. And then 2016, I'd say, was the year that I first started buying properly. And um, and I think it was just because of the ease of using Luno, which was previously BitX or something before that. And so, I go through the year, go through 2017, occasionally putting money in very small amounts. You know, at that point in my life, I think I was sitting at close to 200,000 Rand debt. I had almost no assets, skin on my teeth, still with no money management. And in 2016, on my first purchase from Luna, I sort of woke up and realized like, uh, I'm really fucked. Like, I need to take some responsibility for my financial situation here. And I need to, start thinking more about my future. And so I get into Bitcoin, get into index funds. More money is going into index funds because I'm still unsure of Bitcoin. Um, and then I think it was in the 2017 run, I decide uh, Bitcoin's good. Its price is really high. Let's mine some shit coins. So I go buy some graphics cards and I start mining Monero. And yeah, I mined a few Monero, and I don't know where I had this sort of inclination from back then, but I knew what I didn't want to do was sell any of my crypto. At least I didn't want to sell any of my Bitcoin. And so, 2018, we have our massive dip, and I sort of just walk away. I'm like, uh, I'm not selling. I'm not worried about this. This thing's gonna do what it's gonna do. I'm going choo choo. The Bitcoin train is leaving. This is just a tiny dip. Everybody get on board. Not realizing, the sort of cyclical nature of the beast, and still being very, very fresh. And then I, proceed to commit every single heresy in the crypto space. You buy Ethereum, you watch the really shitty YouTube videos with all the dudes with their mouths open and the up and down arrows. This is bad for Bitcoin. This is good for Bitcoin. And, there's just so much like hopium. There's no consistent message. There's a lot of like anxiety that comes through in a
And
lot of the
nothing's changed
messaging.
until now, right? It's the same shit now.
Exactly. And you know, like I feel like, as it's going on, I'm like, I realized, okay, this guy, this guy, this guy's a trader. This guy's trading. Yeah, like I thought, we were gonna like buy and hold, but like, what is this? And I realized like something is wrong here. Like I shouldn't be listening to these guys. And then I go and I start listening to Bitcoin podcasts on Apple Podcasts, and you know, I'm listening to shows in the Bitcoin network. Let's talk Bitcoin network. Yeah, half the shows in there are filled with like shitcoins, and but it was good to like sort of understand, what's happening in the space, at least at that time for me. And then I just got tired of all of it. I was like,
So this was the bear market, right? This was you were in the bear market now, and where things were pretty quiet.
yeah. Look, I watched a lot of those videos for quite a long time. It definitely gave me a good understanding of what was out there, what was happening. But I would say it took me a while to learn that the messaging that these guys was giving was like complete garbage. And I think like even until last year, I was still consuming podcasts at the very least. And then I got into an argument with, like started reading like Robert Breedlove's pieces because I think Guy Swan was he'd he had narrated a few of Guy's pieces, and this started giving me a way better understanding of like, holy shit, like there's this hard money thing, like this is something completely new to me. Like, you sit and you spend your whole life worshiping at the altar of fiat. You look at your fiat gains in terms of interest accumulation in your bank account, or seeing your stocks being worth like a little bit more, and you don't like really realize up until that point, like, hey, this is all being measured in shitcoins, like, and then from listening to I get into this argument on Twitter where I just said like, fuck it, I'm gonna read the Bitcoin Standard. People have spoken about this book for so long, and my mind just started like blowing up at that point, So read the Bitcoin Standard, read the Sovereign Individual, read Dominic Frisby's book, read Nick Butcher's book, read some Mises, and you just find like your mind like expanding. You realize that nothing else matters. Like Ethereum, whatever they're trying to do, Dogecoin, fucking Cardano, all of this, it's all garbage. Like they're all hanging on Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin dictates, the performance for almost the entire market, and you just sort of realize, you read more, you read Gigi's work, you read Alan Farrington's stuff, Bitcoin is Venice, and you sort of just realize like the gravity of what you've immersed yourself in. And like, that's where I emerge on the other end as like a complete maxi, like I don't want anything else.
And you find peace in being in the maxi. It's also, I find peace in myself because I can focus on one thing and focus on one thing properly. Because my God, the noise out there, it really dilutes your concentration, and you just don't know what to look at. And every single person in the 10,000 other shitcoins are just trying to sell you their specific little niche.
Yeah.
But their niches is all a lie, because it's all one and the same.
Yeah.
It's all one and the same. It's just a lie. And unfortunately, the free market will find that out.
I don't know if it's quite a lie so much as maybe they just don't realize.
Yeah.
Let's be like charitable to their cause, like I think maybe they don't quite realize, because for example, they are still stuck in the mindset of that maybe we can build a better Bitcoin, because they don't appreciate the gravity of like network effects and what a protocol war actually is. And maybe they think that, okay, we can build something that's faster than Bitcoin and therefore it'll be better and achieve more adoption. But that ship has sailed, man. Like it's the initially, maybe in the very early days of Bitcoin, maybe the first year or two, if there were other altcoins competing with it then at like a protocol level, then maybe that could have been the case. But that, like, the network effect is far too great now. And none of them are as secure as Bitcoin. So effectively, they're all useless now.
Yeah, which is often the point that comes up, right? It's like, Bitcoin uses too much energy, and like
Bitcoin doesn't use enough energy.
How much energy do you think is appropriate for securing $1 trillion worth of like a decentralized money that no one can attack? How much energy?
Yeah.
How much?
How much energy is it worth securing a viable working alternative to central banking?
Yeah.
Because when central banking fails, like the devastation that will wreak on the global economy would be more than $1 trillion. Like more than what Bitcoin's energy consumption is. So it's very cheap insurance, actually.
Yeah, you'll often hear like the argument like you can compare Bitcoin to Swift. I'm like, you comparing the completely like wrong things here. Like Swift is supported by the central bank entire world, plus the political and financial infrastructure needed to support all of that all around the world. Like that's the cost of a Swift transaction. And you bring up the Lightning and it's often dismissed right away. Like, so yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, before we get onto Lightning and all that, it's actually, I'm glad you brought up Swift. So I'd actually really like to talk about, the banking cartel in this country, and the fact that you look at every city skyline and the biggest buildings are Unbanked, and what led to that, and also what kind of systemic issues they are driving, such as just complete indebtedness on everybody, because it's just what they do, right? They sell cheap credits and they keep people in perpetual debt. So, I mean, you look at the current stats in South Africa, it's something like 77% of debt to income. South Africa has a current rate of 77% of debt to income. It's probably one of the highest in the world right now. Probably not as high as the USA. And I really want to talk about, the issues in South Africa and how banks keep driving that, because I really think they do. I don't know if anybody wants to start off on that.
Well, I mean, banks are the distribution arm of the Reserve Bank, right? That's all commercial banks are, because the Reserve Bank doesn't have the capacity to originate loans and rehypothecate, all the money. So in the fractional reserve system, they serve a vital role of being distribution and the multiplication arm of the Reserve Bank. But that's all coming to an end with CBDCs, right?
Well, from what I understand, like commercial banks create money by lending it. So, I mean, I'm really quite unsure of how that fits into the CBDC framework, and even more so in South Africa. I think I have quite a great degree of confidence that we won't see anything like that anytime soon here. It feels like projects of that sort of importance sort of just get auctioned off and they never really materialize in anything for the people. So in that regard, I'm sort of very glad at the incompetence of the nation state. But if we circle back to the issue of credit in this country, like I don't know what you do. You have such a high degree of unemployment in this country. You have 5% of the nation's taxpayers footing something like 80% of the income tax that the state collects. Like it's a very tricky thing. Like how else other than debt do people survive in South Africa? You look at the extremely flourishing microloan industry with their predatory lending rates, and you just sort of wonder like how systemically there's been such a huge failure on I guess maybe the state's part to provide a sort of meaningful space where people can play in. Like you mentioned our debt to income ratio, and I was listening to Saifuddin's interview with Dominic Frisby, and especially in a country like South Africa, like young Black people coming out of university or coming into their own, the only thing that we have is our income. Like that is it. We have no assets. We've got nothing to fall back on. And the first thing the state does is tax it, and they tax it heavily. We have no chance of building up any sort of wealth that we can then use to improve a community, maybe send some money home for like dig a borehole or something, like this money is just stolen and then wasted on politicians' vehicles.
Yeah, absolutely. But also on that point, so everybody has an income, but what is it like in terms of youth unemployment? Close to the 50%, or it's like 60%, right? Youth unemployment.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about that kind of segment. They don't have an income, but then you got this incredible amounts of inflation happening. And I was listening to, I can't remember who explained it so well, that it's the poor without assets who really feel the nails and the iron of inflation, because they don't have assets to hedge that. They don't have scarce assets of any kind or any wealth to fight that inflation. So every single thing they buy going forward just becomes more and more expensive, and their wealth, which was close to zero in the beginning, just gets dwindled over time.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it in terms of like real estate, for example. If you live in a township, first off, you don't have a title deed to the shack you live in, so you can't. I mean, that's not going to appreciate. So you won't feel the largesse of inflation there and your real estate value going up. You don't own any stocks or bonds, so you don't get the growth in your assets there from the inflation. So all you get is the downside to inflation, the negative, and none of the upside. And this is why I said that the poor really carry the brunt of inflation the hardest, because even if they can manage to save a couple of $100 a month, it just gets charred by inflation, and they end up just running on a treadmill. And this is maybe why we see so much anger in young people in poor people in South Africa, is because it can't get ahead, man. It's so hard to get ahead. Bitcoin fixes this though, right?
On your point of the shacks, like a lot of the time people don't even own their own shacks, they're renting them. Like if you don't pay your shack rent, like you could find your shack gone, like like I've seen just like the rising food prices over the past year, like the cheapest of the cheap oil. I don't know if you saw that photo on Twitter. It was like a 2-liter crown refined oil was 89 Rand. Like that is crazy. Like I don't understand how people are eating. Like it just blows my mind how most people manage to survive in this country.
And this is a good time to monkey bar into the like how Bitcoin can fix this, then, right? Like if you're saving even a little bit of your wealth or your income in something that respects your time, like Bitcoin, like you experience the upsides over the long term. But it's a case of it's difficult because, like you say, when you grow up with not necessarily a saver's mindset or a good respect for money, and that's taught, right? That's education based. You had to learn that over time, and it really is an education thing. So in our society, we are kind of taught about consumption, consume as much as you can, buy the next thing that's nice, and like don't worry about saving your money. And when inflation is chowing your money, why would you save anyway? So first off, it's a mindset change that needs to be gotten across, and then Bitcoin, if you just hang on to your Bitcoin for the long term, then the rest is easy. Bitcoin will do the work for you, but it is a case of getting that education across.
But before you move to that, it's like, once again, the banks are driving this high tide preference of just consume, go into debt, buy your leather couch or whatever. But on the other side, and this incredible amounts of people in South Africa that don't have a bank account. It's like 25% or something like that, 57% in Africa. And that's basically on failure of KYC, right? Some people don't have homes, can't get a proof of address, or they live somewhere arbitrary that their proof of address is not valid, therefore they can't get a bank account, right? Failure on collateral, they don't have any assets. Failure on credit record because they were in so much debt in the first place. So it's those two factors driving this. And say, let's just focus on those 25% of people. How the hell do they get Bitcoin? how do they get Bitcoin and understand it immediately that they know that they need to keep this and not spend it so they can grow their wealth? And that's the problem we need to solve.
Yeah. The one thing I noticed, because I worked in a call center for quite a bit, and one of the popular products that get sold to people in townships, predominantly Black people, are funeral policies. And sometimes there's a policy where, you know, it's like a little bit of savings that just get deducted from, if you have a bank account, it will get deducted from your bank account. And I see like possibly like there's probably a solution somewhere in there for Bitcoin. It's really hard because, you know, it's an extremely volatile asset for now. And if you're saving for something in the future, you know, and you get your statement and it shows that okay, you know, the value of your portfolio is like down by 80%, you know, like what kind of anxieties does that invoke in someone that already has very little? So that is something that I think needs to be like communicated or solved somehow. I don't know, maybe it's a, you know, a bundled funeral policy and savings plan that's all funded through Bitcoin, and it's sort of custodial, and you know, that might be one way. The other way is, you know, developing these sort of internal economies that can develop where people are using Bitcoin for transactions instead of cash. So using Lightning to go buy some cigarettes, or something small from the spaza shop.
That's some high time preference bullshit right there. Spending your cash on cigarettes.
I understand that. I understand that it's high time preference, but at the same time, you know, for me, the important thing of Bitcoin is not so much the price. Like, I think it's the network that's growing, and the more people who have Bitcoin in their wallets and in their lives, I think it's only so much better for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, you've got to spend some sats first to really like appreciate how useful this is, right? Because if you just keep in Bitcoin and you never spend any of it, I don't think you fully grasp the gravity of what Bitcoin really is. But simultaneously, we would want to get people to save as much as possible. But with the custodial solution, so I used to be a financial advisor a few years back, and I just saw the absolute bullshit products that were sold. That are all based on custodial, like not being able to pull your money out. So like these endowment style plans where your money's locked up for 5 years. If you touch it, there's a penalty. Just the advisor can get his upfront commission, basically, is why they're built like that. And people in the poor communities are the ones that are taken advantage of most by that, especially with funeral plans that come with like a savings component, because there's no way they can pull their money out, and therefore there's no real negative feedback loop that tells the asset manager you are doing a cuck job. So they get invested in these like portfolios that perform horrendously compared to like what the market leaders are giving. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a problem to be solved, and I think as the ecosystem matures, we'll definitely get there. But I think self custody is the way. Just because it keeps everyone honest, man. Like, so obviously we've got a business that sells Bitcoin, and it's self custody only. There's no way we can rent seek because we don't control anyone's money after we've given it to them. So you constantly have to go keep adding value when you go back to them, you know, and that's how you keep a customer. If you got their sats, especially if it's tied up with like a time block or whatever, you know, the incentives are all shifted, and you can really like not do a good job, and because you got their money held captive.
Yeah. I guess, you know, it's between maintaining a balance of like the sort of high time preference thinking of like growing the network. What's the quickest way we can get people in here versus, you know, the long-term outlook of saying we want people to be sovereign, we want them to be responsible for their own, you know, well-being, you know, not having the state be, you know, daddy government deciding for you, hey, you can't do this with your money.
Yeah. And to the point you made right in the beginning about being a Marxist when you're at varsity, I identified that. Like, I was the same. And I think a lot of people went to university kind of were, because Marxism is shrouded in like feel good feelings of like, oh, I want to do good for the world. And then they think that leftism is like a way to do that. And I think it's only when you see a malevolent socialist government in action do you realize, you're like, oh, but they're all like this. This is what they all do. Clearly this shit doesn't work when it's tried in practice. But nothing red pilled me harder than becoming a Bitcoiner. Like, learning about Bitcoin, that got me into being a capitalist, and out of thinking that Marxism was a good idea. And I think that is a great thing to do for the majority of South Africa, because South Africans suffer big time from being infected with Marxism. We all seem enamored by it, and if we can orange pill people in mass and get them to self-custody their Bitcoin, even if it's $100 a month, 50 Rand a month, and they see that grow over the period of 5 years and their wealth just significantly increases, they'll become Bitcoiners and they'll reject the state. And that's the real goal here, I suppose. Solves a lot of problems and you get the state out of your business.
Yeah.
So just going back to self-custody, and obviously that's the essence of Bitcoin, because I'm really scared of what I might just go on a rampage right now, but I'm really pissed off at what has been built around Bitcoin itself in South Africa, and shitcoins as well, because what we're seeing is the only use case is pure speculation, right? We're not really seeing anything else in South Africa. I don't know if you guys have seen Lightning or payments or anything else. And the problem with these exchanges is that I see them essentially as banks on something that is bankless, first of all. Secondly, the way they make money purely is on volume. And volume means they are incentivizing and driving people to trade as much as possible and treat this as something like a hot potato, which it is the furthest thing from. So like, how the hell are we going to try and teach people and help people to understand, like, Bitcoin, first of all, is about just holding it and stacking it and just thinking about the long term? And how the hell do you drive entities such as Stokvels, to buy this and custody themselves? Because it's like a perfect solution with multi-sig, right? You got a certain set of people that's the person who has the monthly payout, the 3 or 4, 5 people pay them out, things like that. How the hell do we drive this kind of behavior? Because everything's against us.
Sucks when you get your payout in the bear market.
Well, if your payment's in sats, then I guess you're all good. I don't know how to answer this question. Like, I think it's extremely complicated one. I think one of the biggest ways to save Bitcoin is like not trade it. Like, but there's still the futures markets that are going to be there. How much I see a situation where the amount of Bitcoin being traded, actively traded, on spot at least, will decrease quite heavily as more and more of it goes into long-term storage. I think it was Stan Druckenmiller in his conversation was saying that during the drawdown, something like 86% of holders didn't sell. They are religious zealots. And I think that this is just going to be, more and more prevalent. Like, we'll have exchange volume in terms of like active selling. It's going to be like the amount of Bitcoin being sold is going to decrease. The value of the coin might be higher, but yeah.
I think it might have a lot to do with the time and like a time in the market thing as well. Like, we all started out, and it's a weird thing about crypto, like you get into it and you immediately think I should trade this. And then only after you beat the full cycle do you realize how foolish that is. And that you should just be holding for the long term and focusing on what you're good at so you can make money to buy Bitcoin. But I think that the only way you can feel is by burning your fingers on the stove. Like, that's unfortunately people just got to spend time.
there's nothing like a margin call email to let you wake up like, oh fuck, this was stupid. This was really stupid. So
That Arthur Hayes
I-
meme is laughing at you as he margin calls you, bro.
yeah,
Was that
yeah,
a
yeah.
was that a BitMix?
No, it was Poloniex.
Oh,
Poloniex. Yeah.
The OG
Um,
shitcoin casino.
yeah, yeah. And I think all of us who are here shouting on Twitter, telling everyone don't buy this shit coin, we've all learned the hard way, and maybe it's just, I don't know if most people are smart enough. I know I definitely wasn't to fully grok this whole ecosystem. I needed to learn the hard way. I needed to learn by going through the altcoin casino. I had to learn about what happens to you when you play with leverage. I'd learn all of that, and like maybe we need to change our messaging a bit more. If you look at the sort of popular crypto YouTubers, they very they're very exciting. They're very lively. They're very like Lambo boys. This thing's mooning. We're gonna make a lot of money, and it sort of invites a lot of high time preference acting and thinking. And you look at the Bitcoin podcast. You look at something from Preston Pish or Saifedean or Michael Saylor stuff. These are very long, detailed, in-depth conversations that really take you in. And I think a lot of people might sort of struggle with getting that deep into something, when they're just like, fuck, I just want to know if this thing's going up. Should I buy now, or should I wait for the dip to be over? And I don't know. Like, this is there's a lot of like human psychology involved in this,
Yeah, absolutely. And the Afrikaans people say it best, bro. Jy nie wil hoor jy moet jy voel, which is kind of what it's like. You gotta get that margin call email, and then you're like, I'm a fucking idiot. What have I been doing?
Yeah.
If I just had held my Bitcoin, I would have more. And when you do those numbers and you look at like, okay, I started my Bitcoin journey with X amount of Bitcoin. I've been trading like a degenerate fiend for 2 years.
Yeah.
I now have less Bitcoin than I started with. What have I been doing?
Yes. You might be up if you measure in rands, like imagine you hold onto your Bitcoin for like 4 or 5 years, right? And you say, fuck it, I'm selling at the tip of this bull cycle. I made it. You got to give 45% of that to the state, bruh. And then you want to buy the dip, you better hope it dips more than 50%. Otherwise, you've got less Bitcoin than when you started. And I don't know how you're gonna feel, how you're gonna feel in another like 8 years when you look back and all those lost sats that you gave to the state for free because you had such a low time preference or high time preference for your acting and thinking. I just think it's a shame to do that with all that hodl energy. You expand, like it's hard work. Like even the last few months, going from 60K and that dip where it touched like I think 28, and shot back up above 30. Like seeing that it's hard to stomach that sometimes, and you put yourself through all of that just to trade it. That's insane to me. That is just completely I don't get it.
This is why the bull market is actually scarier than the bear market to me, because the fact of even thinking of selling it is way more scarier than buying it to me after just being in a couple of years. And when you sell it, right, what the hell do you do with it? Secondly, like, is there any other asset that's better than Bitcoin? Is there one in the world right now?
Exactly.
I've really tried to look, and there's not. But the problem is there is inevitably going to be another bear market because people talk about a super cycle, right? I don't think there's going to be one. I don't think there's too many speculators.
There's a lot of hopium, and you know, for me, the thing that I sort of dread, I really dread, like, you know, what does it mean if there's like a 600K Bitcoin at the end of this year? You know, Bitcoin is the canary in the coal mine. You know, it's telling us constantly that something's wrong, and if it goes to 600K, I like, man, that's telling me something's gone to shit. Like, you know, what does that mean for the millions of people that are left out there, out in the cold, with no life raft? There are so many people we can't reach. Like, it's not their fault they don't know about Bitcoin. You have so many scams, so many Ponzi's. You know,
Yeah.
BitConnect. You know, like these things, they absorb like all this new energy that comes into the space. They're like, hey, there's this Bitcoin thing. Let's get on board, and then they just rug pull people. And so you have all these people that are so suspicious. This is just magic internet money. This is just internet Sudoku, and yeah, yes. So like, yeah,
Yeah, man. Like, so if we are right, you know, if our Bitcoin dreams come true and Bitcoin goes to, let's say, 600,000 US by the end of this bull market, the devastation that is going to be caused by Bitcoin going to that price, because it means that every other currency in the world is just losing value. Jeez, faster than who? Sorry, I was just thinking of a celebrity that really degenerated really fast, but and, you know, what's it, Lindsay Lohan? You know, drop faster than her.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
shit's going to be falling apart. And in that world, first off, your purchasing power won't be $600,000 today. So you'll have less, you know, you will have more purchasing power than you have today, but it won't be as much as you think it's going to be. But also just the utter devastation it's going to cause the fiat environment and all the fiat, you know, poor and the fiat rich. Yeah, it was fucking zombie apocalypse, bro. It's pretty scary to think of.
It's going to be scary for Bitcoiners as well. Like, you still
Yeah.
need to go out into the world and buy your groceries and pay for electricity and pay for water. That's going to be absolutely terrible. I don't look forward. To that. Like, it's all cool to dream of when moon, but like, fuck, like I just think of like all my friends and family.
Yeah.
You know, the ones that absolutely refuse to get it, and you know, the ones that can't get it.
Yeah, but you know, like, it's like Matt Odell says, like, you can't convert everyone, but what you can do is you can save enough Bitcoin yourself, so you can have like a small circle of people that you can help out, you know, when that happens. And that's really the most you can do, short of evangelizing now and telling people, listen, you should really buy some Bitcoin. But when the rubber hits the road and they haven't bought any in this few years down the line and they're like completely destitute, you know, you telling them I told you so is not going to put food in their stomach.
No. Yeah.
So I mean, I read the book by Russell and Bertie, you know, When Money Destroys Nations, and you know, we talk about hyper Bitcoinization and hyperinflation. Do you think hyperinflation will happen in South Africa? Because I mean, we've been reading a couple of articles here and there to say, I mean, we're basically a failed state now, and I don't know if we're a failed state yet. There's a few things that are still working, but like Tensai, do you think hyperinflation will happen? Yeah.
I mean, this is a tricky one for me. Like, I hear what the guys are saying. You know, I also sometimes, occasionally, I'll put on Cape Talk and I'll listen to the Money Show and I'll listen to the guys they bring on. And you know, I don't know if you remember that episode of South Park where they bring the chicken in, where they have to decide like what's going to happen in the economy, and they just slaughter the chicken. And say, just that's what it's like listening to the Money Show. It's like these guys are just
the cutback show,
you know, and you know, that's sort of how I feel like how most like of these serious economists, like, they look and they talk about the South African economy. Like, it's all like extremely superficial. There's not like any real depth. It's like this often parroted stuff where, like, you know, enough people are saying it, so it must be true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I totally missed your question though, so I don't know if you want to just repeat that again.
No, what I was saying is, like we're talking about how we're afraid to spend our Bitcoin down the line, right? And I
Yeah.
think it's going to have, it's to me, it's going to become an inevitability because like something like the rand is going to become something so useless like the Zimbabwean dollar, I believe. Even though it looks strong now, we've got to bear in mind that it's got nothing to do with the Reserve Bank or any internal issues here. It's got nothing to do whatsoever with how well the government is doing or how well the JSE Top 40 is doing. It's got everything to do with how much Biden's printing. And number two is the amount of risk people are willing to take in emerging markets now that everybody has a lot of confidence. It means that a lot of people are buying a lot of bonds in South Africa because we have fairly good yields. Like, well, I don't know what they are, 4 or 5% compared to everywhere else.
Non-negative.
Yeah, non-negative. That's fairly good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That brings a lot of US dollars here. That props up to the rand. So when does that end?
And there's also the need for the South African rand to maintain a relatively stable peg to the dollar. It's all good and well having your rand strengthen, so you can buy a lot of cheap things from the US, but the US is also an important export market for South Africa. So the state is going to try and balance those two things out. But then the price of a barrel of oil is sky high.
And that's going to continue, right? Because it dropped to negative value effectively last year, and there's been there's been a credible amount of inefficient capitalization into oil. And now all of a sudden, as the world restarts, because America's back in the game now, UK's back in the game, Europe is, Asia is, or not Vietnam, they're all having trouble, right?
But New Zealand's not.
Yeah. So as soon as they get back into action, there's going to be an incredible increase in demand for oil, and then all of a sudden there's not enough supply, and that's going to drive a lot of inflation, whether it's direct or indirect, into oil. But like going back to my question is, like the rand being the rate that it is now, it's not scalable. It's like at what point? And hyperinflation is a big word, right? There's a lot of inflation, and then there's hyperinflation. Hyperinflation means like an utter collapse. And since Black Friday in 1997 in Zimbabwe to basically 2008, 11 years. That's how long it took there for hyperinflation.
Yeah.
And at what point does that happen in South Africa? Because I don't know what the fuck saves us now anymore, the rate we're going. And what,
I don't know
3D
either.
printed guns.
The what, sorry?
3D printed guns would save us.
Yeah, like... This is so scary. Like I think my brain sort of shuts down when I'm trying to compute this stuff because it's so real and it's so here, and I see like the number of homeless people just on the street. It's just increasing. Like especially during the past year over COVID. And you sort of scale up the problem. Like okay, let's imagine prices increase by double. What does that look like? How many people are kicked out of their homes? How many people can't afford to eat? Like you just scale up the amount of misery you see, and it's absolutely frightening. Like I get stuck thinking about what hyperinflation looks like here. If I think about the book When Money Dies, and they're describing the hyperinflation in the Weimar Republic, like there was a lot of industry, there was a very like there was a high degree of employment compared to the South African economy.
Yeah.
And in South Africa, you already rely on a lot of working blacks in the city are sending money out to their families in the countryside to support them. And like, what does that look like? If we're in a hyperinflationary collapse, like I can't. It's too raw. It's too real for me. Like,
so definitely read that book, and it really outlines exactly what happened. And it's great because they interviewed a lot of people along the way, and they get the perspective of what happened. You know, store owners, doctors, you know, people in the street. They just really got their perspective, and was so illuminating to me. And every single thing we're doing, as well as America, as well as Europe, and this relentless printing, it is inevitable. And we talked about CBDCs earlier, right? What's the difference? The only difference between CBDCs and banks having money and the current fiat system, right? So what happens is central banks give money through the repo rate to banks, private or not, who distribute that money. And as soon as they distribute any dollar, that becomes debt, right? As you were saying, Tensai, earlier. What CBDCs are is that whenever a central bank distributes money, it becomes debt. And it bypasses any intermediary bank. So all of a sudden, all balance sheets move from these intermediary banks straight to the central bank. And the reason they're doing that is that they don't have interest rates to play with anymore, because you can't go below zero. And if they were to increase, the whole world will collapse. So now they need to pass money very accurately and quickly to individuals in an accurate manner. And what that means is like the cartels and the cartel banks and all them, they're pretty effed. You're going to see a lot of shit happen there, and they'll just be the front end distributors. They'll be like a wallet that the bank gives their liquidity to some person's app on this bank, right? And they'll just make their little transaction fees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does this work the same if the because there's two types of CBDC structure, right? There's the one where the bank does where it's central bank to private bank, and there's where it's central bank to the people. It would what you just explained work the same in both scenarios?
So it'll be central bank to the people, CBDCs.
Okay.
And you were right in saying that we'd probably be way behind other central banks. So China is pretty much past the pilot. UK is in a pilot. Ghana is live.
Wow.
Believe it or not. And South Africa's Ikoka, whatever, not Ikoka, something like that. That's their digital currency. They're pretty far behind, but it doesn't matter, because in the end, it's just going to be worth nothing, like the Zimbabwean dollar. And that's what makes me afraid, once again, like going to like, how does Africa rise above this all? It's the only way is Bitcoin, the only way to protect their wealth, and the only way they can start sending money through remittances home. Like say a Zimbabwean came to work here and wants to send money home to their family. They bypass 50% fees or 30% fees effectively, and they can use Bitcoin on Lightning Network and send it free. So like maybe we just talk a little bit more like, you know, what can Bitcoin solve here in Africa? And maybe let's focus on that as we close out today.
Yeah, so definitely the remittance issue is quite a big one. You know, there's quite a few foreigners working in South Africa sending money home. And you just got to sort of wonder, because like a lot of these guys are working like under the radar. Like you come here, you sneak across the border, you can't get a bank account. It's an incredibly difficult process to send money across the border. So you like, and this is where the issue of self-custody comes in to what you were saying. Like if we can get people to self-custody, take ownership, or, you know, encourage people using the BISC network for peer-to-peer selling. There's a lot that we can do in terms of building the sort of network which will allow these sort of cross-border remittances to take place.
Yeah, I think it will really help, because, you know, I worked in Zambia and Malawi and all that with remittances, and a lot of people, just to send money home takes a few days. They send like $10 worth of rands or whatever, and they receive $7 or $6 worth of rands, and it's quite sad. That's a lot of flipping money to them, you know.
Yeah.
And with Lightning Network, it also, if you can send money home instantly, basically for free, a lot of liquidity is in play now in different countries, so they can actually just change that quite easy, as you said, through BISC or peer-to-peer. Like in Zambia, peer-to-peer has gone up enormously over the last few months or last few years. So at least there's liquidity to change Bitcoin into Zimbabwe dollars or what have you. But more importantly, like they can store their wealth on like Blue Wallet or Moon Wallet or whatever, and they don't have to have cash, because obviously crime's a big fucking problem.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that the remittances is it's the pull. Like it's the thing that, you know, it's like a clear winner. And especially if you live in a country where your government is extremely destructive with its currency, having that entire network and sort of that playbook with like, okay, you send me Bitcoin, and then I can, you know, use some of that to survive. You sort of build in that community, you build in that knowledge, you build in that trust, you build in that network, and it can grow from there organically. Which I think is probably the fastest way. But
absolutely.
It doesn't, in my mind, you know, that doesn't really solve the South African problem, you know, because those networks are quite disparate, and you got to sort of just hope that if there's a group of Nigerians working in South Africa and they're interacting with Bitcoin, that slowly connects to locals working around them to sort of understand that, hey, there's this crazy new digital money that we can send to each other without having to report to the government. Like I can run my spaza shop over here, accept Lightning payments for, you know, whatever. And I can, you know, store this KYC free, well, at least for me, KYC free Bitcoin for my future.
Yeah. I think the remittance one, like, that generates a circular economy in Bitcoin, like we see in El Zonze and El Salvador. They've got the Bitcoin Beach project that's going on there, and we've got the founder coming on in a couple of weeks' time to talk about it. But they literally went from having essentially zero Bitcoin adoption in the town to having like 80%, 90% Bitcoin adoption in the space of 3 years. It's crazy. And vendors, merchants are preferentially accepting Bitcoin and Lightning now. Like it started out with a couple of kids getting paid in Bitcoin to wash cars and stuff, you know, because El Salvador is a majority remittance economy. Most of the money comes from remittances. It gets sent back via Bitcoin now. And these guys are using those sats directly to go and buy things from the vendors. And now, as more people accept it, the flywheel gets kicked up, and it just starts becoming its own circular economy. And that's, you know, what we'll probably see more of that, as, you know, nothing drives adoption more than real need, you know, than a crisis. So I think when the inflation does ramp up in South Africa, and inevitably it will, like, this is when we're going to see adoption. This is what we've seen in Nigeria. We've seen in Zambia. Like these volumes are going through the roof on these P2P exchanges. And, you know, that's only like the first transaction, because once you've done one transaction on a P2P platform, you go truly P2P and you like don't deal with those platforms anymore. So it's very encouraging to see. And that's kind of the silver lining to all of this, is like, there's an alternative to central banking. And when they fucking destroy the system because they just pulling the levers too much and they don't realize unintended consequences, there is an alternative. Thanks for that. Like, you know,
and I think sorry. So I think a lot of problems have been around, you know, the exchange between Bitcoin and Rand or dollars or whatever, right? It's that on and off ramp that's an issue, because it's just a step in between payments or whatever. And I think people really misunderstand how important Strike and all these other different payment platforms for inter-exchange from Lightning to whatever fiat currency is going to be. Because all of a sudden, these people who have Bitcoin on their wallets can go to a coffee shop, and on their Lightning wallet, they scan a QR code and they just pay, and Bitcoin gets deducted. but that restaurant receives dollars, and nobody had to do anything. They just chose how they want to receive on their end.
Yeah.
And this is going to change everything. It's
Yeah.
going to change everything.
Yeah. I think the main thing is we have to build for the organic use case, not what we want to see happen, but what people need, and just be ready. Like, if we start having a situation where the rand devalues more in a meaningful way, where people, feel it more, like more people are going to seek shelter, and we just have to be there saying, we have an umbrella for you, we have a lifeboat, we have a life jacket.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
So I mean, on that point, I don't know if we want to close out with anything about
I think we should answer a question in the comments we got here, Brandon, before we close out. We've got one here that I'd like to touch on. Ken saying, you saying all crypto is crap, lol. Okay, so I think this is we should probably discuss like maximalism and like why we think all other cryptos are crap. Tensai, maybe you want to start, and then we each take our turn, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess a lot of it's like from learning the hard way, that a lot of these projects are built with a perceived like misunderstanding of what Bitcoin is. Like, you'll have the nano guy shilling you because it's like 1/1,000,000th of Bitcoin energy spend in a transaction, when they don't really fully understand what that energy is actually for. And just up until a few weeks ago, they were suffering from spam attacks on their network because they had no fees. You just sort of learn about the hardness of money. You learn about how Bitcoin is so compatible with different cultures, like where you learn like something like proof of stake will most likely be considered haram for many Muslims. And how are you okay with your money? How are you okay with your money like not being compatible with like 1.5 billion people around the world? Like, and that's just okay to you? Like that's crazy. You sort of just, you go down the rabbit hole and you see like a lot of these projects are built on perceived misunderstandings. They don't realize the scaling is happening on the Lightning Network. So half of your alts are destroyed just by that alone. And yeah, like I don't know what else you guys want to add to that.
Yeah, I think the biggest red herring or thing that people confuse is trading activity with actual real world utility. So if I look on the top 10 or top 20 cryptos that are happening, and you see their price action, a lot of them have outperformed Bitcoin in the last year. And that's all trading activity. That's not people using it in the real world, man. That's traders going out there because the markets are small, market caps are low. They can go out there and they can trade these things because they're volatile. And that's what you want if you're a trader, especially if you're a crypto trader. So don't confuse price going wild with actual real world utility, because that's just a flash in the pan. Like, if you've been around long enough, you've seen this happen all before. Like, I mean, I saw it in 2017. I mean, I first got into Bitcoin in 2015, right? So like my first bull run was 2017. But the guys earlier in the 2013, 2014, that era, they saw the shitcoins doing the same thing as well. And like, by the time you've seen it 2-3 times, you're like, okay, I know what happens here. These things moon, they crash in the bear market, and then they go to zero, man, because they don't have real world utility, which means they don't have staying power. It's just about the trade, which is essentially just about the rug pull at the end of the day. Because all these guys are doing is they're selling you their coin in exchange for Bitcoin, which they are keeping. The founders are keeping the Bitcoin, and they're basically scamming you out of your Bitcoin, which the sats you're never going to get back again. And then when you understand that, like Lightning, your scaling happens on your second layer. When you understand that Lightning is only the second layer on top of Bitcoin, and third and fourth and fifth and sixth and 10th layers can be built on top of Bitcoin, then all of a sudden, all of these use cases of like instant transactions, like very low fees, smart contracts, these things all go away because they can all be built on top of Bitcoin while leveraging Bitcoin security. And Bitcoin is the most secure network on earth because it has all of this energy consumption that goes into it. And once that penny drops, you're like, oh, okay. So if we want to build real utility, because I'm not arguing that there isn't real utility in smart contracts. I really think there is. It's a brilliant concept, and self-executing contracts to remove lawyers from the equation is a fucking brilliant innovation. But the Bitcoin network is not ready for it yet, and the world is not ready for it yet, because otherwise they'd be doing real world things on Ethereum. Like, cool, there is a bit of DeFi happening and there is some activity there, but Ethereum is run into the same issues that Bitcoin's run into in scaling on the base layer. That's why their fees are massive and through the roof, and it's kind of unusable. So they have to move to a proof of stake system so they can drop fees. But then they sacrifice, the trade-off is you sacrifice security. So at the end of the day, like, if the real killer app of Bitcoin, the killer feature is money. Like, that's all it's trying to do. All the other stuff comes later. And if you build on top of sound money, because money is 50% of every transaction, if you build on top of that and you build your smart contracting and everything else on top of that, you've got security, which is what you need for private property rights, which is what contracts are all about. So all of these other coins that are built on top of, delegated proof of stake or proof of space or whatever consensus mechanism they come up with, if it's not hyper secure, you can't have contracts on top of it because it'll be undermined, essentially, because it's cheap to attack. So once you understand all of that, then you finally come to the realization, like, oh, Bitcoin is the only one that really will win this fight, because the rest of them are kind of a waste, really. If you're not building on top of Bitcoin, you're just wasting resources.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, just to go to first principles, like, why were cryptocurrencies? Why was Bitcoin created? Because it was the first one, right? Satoshi created it to be the antithesis of central banks. And because of that, he had to create a format to distribute wealth, or a form of wealth to people in a fair manner, starting at zero.
Yeah.
Right. And through proof of work, people joining out of their own accord, putting in the energy and work, they could get a mining reward and the transaction fees out of that. And that has grown to $1 trillion asset. In 2014, 2015, you got things such as Ethereum that got created with 70% went to the founders automatically, and now 30% over time will get handed to everybody else. Those people were on proof of work as well. Now, what do you think about that? Right? Why the hell would they get 70%? First of all, it's just a Ponzi scheme. Like, it just call it what it fucking is. Second of all, now they want to move to a system where you have to have 32 ETH to have some form of voting power in the proof of stake system. So it means you have to have wealth in the first place in order to have votes. It's just creating.
Sounds like aristocracy to me.
It is. And then
it's repeating. It's repeating the same system we have here, where value accrues to those who have the most. Yeah,
it's the exact same system. And the other 9,999 shitcoins, they all just have some central point and marketing team and something that they're trying to sell you. And they all just are punting their little marketing scheme at you, and they're just trying to take you out and pick you one by one and make you the product. Whereas Bitcoin is the only thing in this world that is open to everyone, but nobody rules it and nobody owns it. And you just got to focus on what actually matters and what wins in the free market. And it will be Bitcoin. It will be.
Yeah.
This is serious business, man. Like, the battle for the separation of money and state is a serious business. And like, if you want to be in on this fight, like, you don't have time to be fucking around with altcoins and like having your attention diverted like from what the real fight is about. It's not about putting logistics on the blockchain. Like, you don't need that. Put that in a SQL database. Like, who needs fucking logistics on the blockchain? And these narratives fall apart and become self-evident over time that they're a complete failure. But that doesn't stop people from spinning them up again every 4 years with a new hype cycle. And that's why maybe it's what I said earlier. It comes back to people have to burn their fingers, and they have to come to this realization themselves after getting screwed that, okay, those salty old dudes who said that this was right back then, they might have known a thing or two about this, because they've been burnt themselves and lost hundreds of thousands of rands in today's value by fucking around with shitcoins.
Yeah. Bitcoin to me is the new religion. You look at the evolution of the Greek gods from the primordial gods of chaos and whatever, and they give birth to the Titans, and the Titans give birth to the Olympic gods, and you see at each stage there's this evolution of man's understanding of like the natural world that slowly gets concentrated. And I think the evolution is Jesus himself, who carried us for the last 2,000 years. Then there's been nothing to really reflect our new understanding of the information age. And I think I have this very strong sense that Satoshi is our new Christ, so to speak. How often do you see the words being sort of, this is the last message of Satoshi that he left on the Bitcoin hackers, and I just I feel like we've come to this moment where we maxis, we are like the first disciples, and we are carrying this torch forward, and it's light and it's burning bright, and it's our job to share with people this beautiful instrument which can liberate your time and your value from theft.
Amen.
And deliver prosperity to you and your community. Yeah.
See, I like that, because I do think of it as a religion. The thing is, I've always had a problem with authority through my life, right? And maybe that's what brought me to Bitcoin. And I've never been a religious type, and I never looked towards some like centricity or some central point of power. And now you've got something that no one rules, but everybody rules. And it's the only thing in this world where a group can follow something where there's no central point to follow. It's the only thing in this world, because Ethereum is Vitalik, Christian, whatever is Jesus. It's the same thing. Not the same thing, but it's similar things. And that's why I think that's what draws me a lot to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I want to push back a bit on that though, Brandon.
Sure.
Religion is kind of decentralized, becomes decentralized over time as well, because the dominance of the narrative shifts. So initially you had let's say the Greek Orthodox Church dominated the narrative, and the Catholic Church dominated the narrative, and then you have these rifts form, and basically hard forks that happen, and you have essentially now consensus of Christianity is not maintained centrally at all anymore. It's run by a series of decentralized side chains, as it were, kind of loosely adhering to the initial consensus rules. And the same with Islam, right? And the same with Buddhism, and the same with Judaism. There's all these different sects. I think and I'm non-religious, right? And I grew up in a very religious Afrikaans conservative culture, but I'm not religious myself now. But I've come to appreciate religion more the older I get, because stability is underrated. Having that stability of knowing that, okay, this is the way that we do things, and this has given our culture a guiding principle to follow, and has given us prosperity over time. Like the Protestant work ethic, for example, there is a lot to be said for that. And I don't want people to think that us Bitcoiners are a bunch of filthy heathens. There's a lot of very religious Bitcoiners out there as well. And Tensai, like you said earlier, Bitcoin is compatible with Islam, and the way that the Islamic world views the way that money should be used, without usury and without interest, etc. And I think it's very much compatible with all religions, because fundamentally it's honest and it's just, and that is kind of the central point of all major monotheistic religions at the moment. So, Brandon, you motherfuckers need Jesus, bro.
Well, for the first time in my life, I actually can't argue with you. That was perfect debate.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a first for me as well. I didn't think I'd be coming up defending religion, but yeah,
pretty good. Pretty good. Well, on that point, Tensai, where can people find you?
Twitter. Just
Oh,
Twitter.
Twitter.
Yeah.
And you are
Good
at
value,
Tensai
good value.
Bankai.
At Tensai Bankai, yes.
Cool.
Yes.
Well, thank you so
Awesome.
much for all your time. It was really such a good chat. I really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
it has been. It has been. Thank you so much for letting me come on your show. I like this pleb series you're doing, and I hope there are a whole lot more coming on after me.
Cool,
We're gonna
man.
be eating steaks at the 100K party, bro.
Yes. Yes.
All right, guys. Have a good
Later.
evening.
Cheers, guys. Have a good one.
Cheers. Cheers.
Bye.